This video is sponsored by Aura. The reality of separating art from the artist is that everyone's moral compass varies too much for us to reach a clear solution. The notion of separating art from the artist is one of the most controversial and widely discussed dilemmas across the world, especially given the never-ending cycle of legendary figures having their shadows brought to light. Separating art from the artist involves consuming art in which one's appreciation for an artist's work outweighs any potential disdain for the artist's negative actions and behavior. And the people who adhere to this idea believe that art should be judged independently from its creator. They believe that understanding and appreciating a work of art requires recognizing its inherent value rather than focusing on the artist's flaws or actions. And in contrast, those who oppose separating art from the artist typically believe that doing so is a misguided attempt to uphold this fragile sense of morality and avoid accountability altogether, because art often reflects an individual's experiences and perspectives, providing us with reliable insight into the artist's opinions and state of mind. And if we were to accept this notion, it would make it hard to separate art from the artist. This dichotomous way of thinking is the reason why it is such a recurrent topic, because after all, if you look at the situations where this topic is discussed or brought up, they tend to vary in the severity of the artist's actions and involve way too many layers to reach a unanimous decision that applies to most artists. Throughout history, some of the greatest artists of all time have produced transcendent work while simultaneously living lives filled with personal turmoil, contradictions, and in extreme cases, criminality. James Brown is considered the godfather of soul music and one of the most influential musicians of all time. And yet, he was also a serial domestic abuser who routinely withheld money from his background dancers and shafted co-writers and producers on song credits. John Lennon was a fantastic songwriter who consistently advocated for peace in his music while also being abusive to his first wife and child. And of course, you have R. Kelly, who spearheaded an entire generation of 90s R&B. In addition to being responsible for millions of records sold under his own name, he also lent his creativity to the greater music industry by producing generational records for legendary figures like Michael Jackson and unfortunately, Aaliyah, all while being one of the most notorious child predators in pop culture history.
I don't even want none of the above. I want to piss on you. Yes, I do. I'll piss on you. I'll pee on you.
Sidebar, come real quick. You 90s niggas are nasty for not wondering why this man was lurking in the background of her album, especially for an album called Age Ain't Nothing But a Number that he wrote for her, by the way. Do you mean to tell me no one thought this was weird? No one? No one at all, right? Y'all didn't notice anything off with this.
There's something up, because I've been getting a rundown on the street. Everybody seems to think that y'all are either girlfriend or boyfriend or cousins or friends. Let's just get the record straight.
No, we're not. We're just very close. He's my best friend.
Yeah, cool.
Now who found who?
In the whole wide world.
These niggas was wearing matching outfits while she was saying, "Oh, he's my best friend," as a teenager. As a teenager. I don't think it takes a genius to understand that no teenage girl should be around any grown-ass man, but whatever, I guess, right? The niggas in prison now having talent show battles with Tory Lanez and Cosby, so I digress. It sucks to say, but it's almost like being gifted creatively demands that another aspect of your humanity be a little off. This is why so many great artists throughout history were considered tortured souls who use their artistic prowess to try to articulate their obscure points of view through their creations. This is also why record labels encourage music artists, especially rappers and rock stars in the 90s and 2000s, to portray these fake struggle personas to the public and create material from that perspective. Hip-hop and rock audiences in particular were often captivated by artists who had lived lives filled with adversity because these artists gave them someone that they could live vicariously through. On top of that, these genres always emphasized the importance of authenticity, which, before social media, meant that the facades that these artists portrayed to the public could be easily maintained. And even with their flaws, a great artist's work can withstand the test of time. This duality, the public admiring the art despite their disdain for the artist's personal life, isn't new. However, it wasn't until the 20th century that these ideas began to crystallize into the issue that we deal with today. Can we separate the artists from their art? However, there is a more important question that's frequently overlooked. Has your data been separated from you without your knowledge? Well, thanks to today's sponsor, Aura, you can find out for yourself. Aura is a digital security service that provides you with identity protection services from online threats. And if you're on the internet, which most of us are, then there's a good chance that your personal information has been compromised without your knowledge. Every day, a big company is in the news for having data breaches, leaving our personal information like our home addresses and our social security numbers available to the highest bidders on the dark web. And what's even worse is that most of the time, these individuals face zero consequences. So why should we continue leaving our information in the hands of these companies? Instead of hoping your information wasn't affected by hackers or digital mishaps, give yourself a fighting chance and sign up for Aura today. You can access my link in the description or access the link on my screen to try Aura for a free 14-day trial. But believe me, that'll be more than enough time for you to reap the benefits of what Aura can do for you. The beauty of Aura is that they will continuously monitor the dark web and alert you if they find any weird activity in your bank accounts or if any of your personal information is being misused, essentially doing all the hard work for us. Additionally, they can identify data brokers selling our information and submit opt-out requests on our behalf. And to further put your mind at ease, Aura will provide you with up to $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario ever happen. There's nothing worse than working hard and having someone else reap the benefits. So don't let your identity fall into the hands of strangers. Give Aura a few weeks to show you how wonderful it is to have your data remain in your possession. Separating art from the artist began as an academic approach to poetry. It emerged in the early 20th century with the New Criticism movement and was further promoted by mid-20th century critic Roland Barthes. The New Critics were advocates of an approach that eliminated the creator entirely, adhering to a belief in implementing a more objective and rigorous approach to interpreting literature by solely focusing on the written text itself, disregarding external factors like artistic intent and historical context, believing that the meaning should come exclusively from the internal structure and the language of the text. This analytical approach led to the New Critics being seen as revolutionaries, much like Barthes during his era. However, where the two differ is that the New Critics wanted literary analysis to be seen as another form of science. You see, in the early 20th century, science had begun overtaking religion and philosophy as one of the most accepted world viewpoints. And this shift in societal thinking is understandable. You see, because science's foundation is rooted in more tangible concepts as opposed to philosophy and religion, which are based on more spiritual concepts. And while each has its place in society, science was able to satisfy a need for clear and concise answers that religion and philosophy couldn't provide. Religion, philosophy, and science ultimately serve the same function. They act as guides and provide us with answers about how to deal with the human experience. And when you're presented with scientific breakthroughs like antibiotics, vaccines, yes guys, vaccines do work, and even going to the fucking moon, it's easy to see why people will begin relying on science to provide them with solutions instead of seeking guidance from the Bible or the words of Socrates. To put it in further perspective, if you have a torn ACL, relying solely on prayer isn't going to help you heal, and long-winded metaphysical conversations about what is pain aren't going to help either. You're going to need surgery. You're going to need science. And this change in societal perception is why the New Critics wanted to have literary analysis to be considered a part of science. The public respected science. So if this method were seen as another aspect of science, then theoretically, it would be viewed as a highly accepted way of interacting with literature. During the early 20th century, New Criticism became the go-to technique for literary critics when approaching their work. And by the mid-20th century, the conversation about the separation of art and the artist had evolved to incorporate more postmodern and post-structuralist perspectives. Some of the most notable examples come from the previously mentioned Roland Barthes. In his 1967 essay, The Death of the Author, Roland Barthes argues that an author's intentions and background shouldn't limit the evaluation of their work because once a piece of writing is published, it belongs to the world. The birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author. What Barthes proposes here is the idea that the reader, not the author, has the final say in what a piece of text is trying to communicate because once it's in the public's hands, it's now open to multiple interpretations. This type of analytical attitude has been a staple in hip-hop and serves as the go-to method for fans and critics engaging in musical analysis for the most part. Because while I do believe that fans draw conclusions from lyrics, they still contextualize the lyrics by considering the artist's personal life and intentions. However, even the extent to which this happens depends heavily on the artist and the subject matter of the material. Because respectfully, no one is doing lyrical deep dives into Playboi Carti's lyrics because the messaging and concepts of his songs are pretty straightforward. But when it comes to separating art and the artist, hip-hop can become a bit complex in its context because in its truest sense, It's a deeply personal form of expression. Hip-hop has always been heavily intertwined with an artist's persona, especially because of the culture's emphasis on authenticity. Who you are, where you come from, what you've experienced, and more importantly, how you convey your story to the audience has always been essential and a standard that every MC has been held to. But because rappers pour their lived experiences into their music, it makes it especially hard for their flaws and perspectives not to be considered when assessing their music. One of my favorite songs of all time is Kanye West's I Wonder. And because of how emotionally attached I became to that song, I never fully realized until very recently how the song has so many emotionally inspiring messages, along with some of the most random gooner-brained lyrics.
I better watch God calling from the hotlines. Why he keep giving me hotlines? I'm a star, how could I not shine?
Pretty nice, right? These few lines encapsulate the unique feeling of accomplishing your hopes and dreams. There's even a tinge of humility in wondering why God provides him of all people with such a high level of creative energy. So there's no harm there, right? But then he says the following.
How many ladies in the house without a spouse? Something in your blouse got me feeling so aroused. What you about?
According to an unreviewed annotation on Genius.com, we're meant to believe that this is a double entendre about Kanye loving what's underneath this woman's blouse, her breasts and her heart. But knowing what we know about Kanye's love for porn and all things related, it might be safe to assume that this line wasn't so interested in love, but rather lust. Thank you, Kanye. I did not know that beautiful big titty butt naked women just don't fall out the sky. I didn't know that.
I know it's a movie reference, bro. I know it's a movie reference. Don't talk to me like I don't know what the fuck it's referencing.
With just these two excerpts, we have to wonder how accurate the suggestion that Bartz has really is. Do we take these lines for what they are at face value and ignore the source of inspiration? Or should we also factor in Kanye's personality, his public admission of lust addiction, and his tendency to objectify women to provide us with additional context to this line and the rest of his art where it's applicable? As Bartz suggests, we're the interpreters. We have more power and influence over the interpretation and can provide an alternative meaning to Kanye's lyrics. Because once again, when the work is released, it belongs to us, the audience. And historically, the audience in hip hop has always played an important role in dictating the meaning of lyrics. Whether they come from the streets or the burbs, fans of the genre bring their own life experiences to the music, creating new interpretations that don't always align with the artist's original intentions. And I believe this is where aspects of Bartz's theory are more applicable, because in hip hop, the fans often interpret the music in ways that the artist couldn't have anticipated. Kendrick Lamar's music is a prime example of how fans from various backgrounds will unearth layers of meanings in his work, with theories that range from plausible to, all right, gangsta, you're definitely reaching right now. Like, gangsta, come on now. The people who can see Braille don't need Braille because they can see, and Braille is for the blind. You know what? God bless her. Anyways, I remember the impact that To Pimp a Butterfly had on the culture when it came out. More specifically, the impact that the song Black of the Berry had. You see, Black of the Berry is a nuanced and layered track in which Kendrick passionately and painfully delivers his analysis of how the racial animosity of white America towards black people, along with internalized oppression, has impacted both himself and the black community as a whole. Listeners and critics alike have debated the song's meaning for years, with many holding differing opinions about the track's messaging. However, the source of what truly makes the song so provocative can be found in one specific line, the line regarding Trayvon Martin and the theme of hypocrisy that's displayed throughout the track.
So why did I weep when Trayvon Martin was in the street? When gangbanging make me kill a nigga blacker than me? Hypocrite.
This was, and probably still is, the most controversial line of his career, if you ignore anything he said on Meet the Grams. Kendrick's direct mention of hypocrisy, along with the confrontation with the violence in the community, has led to a split in interpretations of Black of the Berry and its message. Some see the song as this unique hybrid of self-aggrandizing and self-critical introspection, while others view it mainly as an indictment of external societal forces that have been trying to erode the essence of black culture. The public split reaction reflects the complexity that often comes with dissecting Kendrick's music, even if it's just one line. And while Kendrick does attack these themes from a more personal perspective, the track is still crafted in a way that leaves room for other interpretations. For those who aren't familiar with Kendrick Lamar's music before 2024, there's an unspoken mutual understanding between him and his audience that whatever I'm saying in this track isn't the gospel, it's just my opinion. And something that gets overlooked too often when discussing Kendrick Lamar and his music is that Kendrick Lamar is not a revolutionary. He's an artist and a very talented one at that. And while Kendrick does share points and ideas that he wants us to grasp, he tries his best to avoid coming off as pretentious or preachy as if he has all the answers and the final say in the matter, despite that image being how the casual audience perceives him and at times how he may or may not lean into that imagery and perception of himself. He does portray strong convictions about his beliefs and consistently conveys that tone. However, there have been moments in Kendrick's career when even his own audience perceived his actions as patronizing or hypocritical, particularly after they had more time to analyze Black of the Berry, his Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers album, his 2024 beef with Drake, and his decision to collaborate with certain artists. More on this in a minute. For some, Black of the Berry's aggressive tone serves as a critique of how blackness is commodified or misunderstood by the broader culture. And for others, the reference to Trayvon Martin seems to suggest that Kendrick is undermining the message of Black empowerment by echoing sentiments of respectability politics, implying that we can't complain about police brutality and racism while Black on Black violence remains a significant issue. In either case, the public's interpretation of the song can be just as valid as Kendrick's intent, as it reflects the audience's social, political, and personal feelings if we're adhering to Bart's thought process. But from my perspective, the Trayvon Martin line is Kendrick indicting himself for the kind of life he lived before the world knew who he was.
If I told you I killed that nigga at 16, would you believe me? Or see me to be innocent Kendrick you seen in the street?
Kendrick has alluded to his violent past throughout various parts of his career.
The fans don't know about me. I don't think they really understand the story all the way. As far as I put out there, I'm just the good kid. I put out the positive out there, but they don't know the negatives I had to go through yet. I told them I went to school and I got straight A's, and I told them I ate cereal and watched cartoons in the morning, but I didn't tell them that I was out there in the streets with the homies. I mean, you growing up with them, you're gonna hang with them, and you're gonna get into at the end of the day. And that's another element that I put in my next project, where I really go in depth, being a young Black male trying to survive and escape the influences of growing up in Compton, which I feel nobody's never really talked about. They just said what we did and that was it. No reasons why or nothing.
And while I don't want to speculate and venture into Trap Lil Ross territory of diet snitching, it may be possible that this line serves as a personal question to himself based on his past indiscretions. Why should I care about Trayvon's death when my actions caused the murder of another Black man as well? I did the same thing. America's racism has been responsible for the destruction of the Black community for centuries. We don't own any planes that fly into coke. It gets installed into our communities. And yet it's our image that you see when you think of a drug dealer. We're the ones who are forced to live in an environment with no room for opportunities and then subsequently punished for utilizing the alternatives at our disposal to gain camaraderie, to get money, to protect ourselves. But at the end of the day, the leader of the free world on national TV who pushes political policies and rhetoric that methodically destroys our community isn't the only one responsible for the death of Black men. It was me too. I was the reason why another Black man left this earth too soon. So why do I get to be here as a superstar rapping this peaceful, positive while trying to condemn this behavior when I did it too? By participating in gang culture, directly or indirectly, those actions contribute to the cold reality of being complicit in the murders of other Black men. Examining Kendrick's lyrics across his albums can reveal that this line may be his response to the guilt and shame that he feels regarding his past actions and how they conflict with his self-identity. The hypocrisy exists not only within Kendrick, but also in the modern Black identity. The older generation will be quick to talk down on Meg Thee Stallion and Cardi B's WAP, but conveniently forget about their actions at Freaknik. Dr. Umar Johnson has become the poster child for Black consciousness by shitting on Black men for dating interracially and not taking on more leadership roles in the community, while simultaneously being a deadbeat dad, someone who directly embodies the negative stereotype of the absentee Black father. And yet, he's arguably the most famous conscious figure in modern pop culture, which says a lot about where we're at right now. Kendrick seems to always deal with underlying emotions of survivor's guilt and believing that there are two sides of himself that are in constant conflict with one another. This is something that has been highlighted once again since his beef with Drake because of the morality angles that Kendrick had used against Drake in the battle, reprimanding him for having no sense of black culture and jacking everyone else's, and monetizing from those images of blackness that aren't authentic to who he is, to also Drake being a deadbeat dad and a misogynist who abuses women. And with Kendrick's perception as a conscious rapper and him standing on the idea of being a man who puts morals above superficial gain, his decision to work with artists like Playboi Carti and Kodak Black has fans, stans, and haters alike viewing these actions as questionable at best and blatantly hypocritical at worst. How can he talk down on Drake for being a
fucking deadbeat that should never say more life
and then proceed to make multiple songs with a known deadbeat father in Playboi Carti? How can he advocate for women's rights while working with and bigging up Kodak Black and Dr. Dre, two people who have a documented past of abusing women?
They judge you, they judge Christ. Godspeed for women's rights. They judge you, they judge Christ. Godspeed for women's rights. They judge.
The reality is that Kendrick Lamar, once again, is not a revolutionary. He's an artist, and more importantly, he's human. Humans are flawed, and if you dig into anyone's past, you're liable to find some contradictions at some point and even see some decisions they've made that'll have you questioning them as a person. There's no realistic reason to expect that Kendrick is going to be perfect all the time. At the same time, Kendrick fans and stans should stop using the "he's not your savior" line as some big joker card that absolves Kendrick Lamar from criticism, because it's natural to wonder how a person can take a firm stance in one situation and then approach another similar situation with a completely different stance and energy. Hypocrisy and duality are two themes that come up frequently in Kendrick's career, and two themes that come up frequently during discussions of separating art and the artist. But if we consider Bartz's perspective once again, we can reach a compromise. While I think Bartz's heart is in the right place, eliminating the creator's personality and surrounding context isn't the right way to assess art. Bartz's theory may encourage a more open and diverse approach to literary interpretation, but allowing so many interpretations to be considered can lead to the absence of a core message, and if the message is left up to anyone's interpretation, then what stops people from going off the deep end and one day trying to justify the messaging of Mein Kampf? Oh, actually, wait a second. Never mind. Our roles as critics and consumers of art shouldn't consist of forcing the world to accept our interpretations as the correct and only versions, especially over the artist who made the project that we're critiquing. The best means of engaging with art is to do so in a thoughtful and nuanced way, offering perspectives that also consider the author's intentions and cultural context. And by looking at the power and influence of Black of the Berry, we can see and understand that the track, along with Kendrick's overall artistry, are not fixed narratives solely dictated by Kendrick Lamar's personal life. However, they're not solely dictated by the audience either. Instead, they're places of negotiation where the meaning of the work is developed in the space between the artist and the listener. And it's this lens that allows us to acknowledge the flaws of an artist while assessing their art that helps us contextualize the relationship between the art and its creator and our role as the consumers of their art. The beautiful thing about art is that we're able to develop an emotional bond with it due to its ability to help us express emotions that we can't conceive on our own. And music is like a timestamp that can evoke a lot of memories from different moments in your life. Whenever I hear Linkin Park's In the End or any other songs in their Hybrid Theory album, it brings me back to 2007 with me on the family computer playing different games on y8.com, shout out to anyone who remembers y8.com, and watching an endless amount of Naruto AMVs. The entire Hybrid Theory album honestly provides you with such a heavy amount of nostalgia, as that was probably the easiest time of my life in hindsight. So even though I still had problems in my life at that point, my nostalgia will blind me to it, especially when the present day seems a lot more stressful than anything I had to deal with back then. And I imagine the same thing happens to people from previous generations. So if you find yourself emotionally attached to certain songs or even certain artists, I can understand why it would be so difficult to completely detach yourself from the material once you realize that the source of inspiration may involve something that you morally disagree with, or you face an uncomfortable revelation that the artist who created all those albums that you love turns out to be a fraud who never embodied authenticity. They were just performing a new and improved style of kayfabe, looking to gain fame and acclaim.
Due to the fact that I was from the streets, but I never killed anybody, it was just easier for me to pose like a backpacker. But I actually really love street niggas. And I don't really listen to backpack music like that. Okay. I listen to Cash Money, Jay-Z.
Okay, so you say you're not really from there?
Not at all. I was using.
This realization might even make you wonder if the flaws or crimes exhibited by the artist reflect something within yourself, because why else would you be so drawn to their music?
He's gay, isn't he? Yep. And I was his biggest fan. That make me gay, don't it? Yep. I know it's wrong, but I really want my own room.
I didn't grow up in the 90s, so I don't have any attachment to music from that generation. So it's easy for me to condemn someone like R. Kelly because I don't have any songs of his that played during any critical moments in my life, like a graduation ceremony or any weddings, nothing. But I do acknowledge that plenty of other people do. So even though R. Kelly is a predator, the people who love the Ignition remix or Bump and Grind aren't focusing on the fact that he violated young girls. They're reminiscing over the joy they felt when Ignition was playing at their best friend's barbecue, or the emotional comfort that I Believe I Can Fly provided them at their mother's funeral. And I think it's safe to say that this is where most people fall on the spectrum of separating art from the artist, for better or worse. Because if you're an avid music listener or even a casual one, I'd safely bet that there's a song, an album, an artist, or even a band that is attached to a core part of your life, and you'll find any excuse to justify why you can't or won't stop engaging with the material despite the outside issues that come with the art. And with this emotional attachment comes the inevitable confrontation with the tension between eliminating any work created by morally corrupt individuals or ignoring the artist entirely and focusing only on the creation. But this isn't a simple left or right choice. It's a process of understanding, dealing with disappointment, and ultimately deciding how you want to interact with the art that once felt like a mirror to your soul. Because there is no perfect solution. Art, much like its creators, is complex. It isn't shaped solely by technique, but by the experiences, worldview, and unfortunately, sometimes the personal demons of the artist. And yet, if the art is good enough, it will still be able to transcend its creator. A song can speak to a universal truth, regardless of whether the artist personally embodies that truth in their life. The best approach in this case is to accept the complexity and embrace the belief that art can still hold value, even if the artist doesn't live up to the ideals that we projected onto them. By allowing ourselves to embrace both the admiration for an artist's work and the recognition of their flaws, we can begin to reconcile these two aspects as integral parts of the human experience. And that's the true beauty of great art. It can be messy and complicated, possessing the ability to have even more layers and evolve, just like us.